Hello and welcome to this breakout session. Today I will present you our work in the work package 12 of the promotion project on the development of scenarios for a meshed offshore grid in the North Sea. We will focus on some technical aspects, but mainly on why all of this leads to a need for high cooperation between stakeholders and member states. My name is Olivier Antoine and I am Power System Expert with Tractable. This is a work performed with many of my colleagues here in Tractable and in particular with Pierre Hainaut and Karim Karoui. For information, you can see here two logos of Tractable. This is a result of internal restructuration and I will not detail that today. On the agenda for today, three main parts. The first one, what would an HVDC offshore grid in the North Sea look like? We will detail our assumption, methodology, and present you some results. Then we will list the key messages that we could get from those results and that we can bring to the deployment plan. Finally, we will list the next steps and the way forward. So why is it important to develop possible scenario and possible grid topologies? So we know from the wind resource assessment that up to 200 gigawatt could be installed of offshore wind in the North Sea. So where are the best sites? How much will it cost? How to connect them? This is a number of questions that we don't know and we would like to try to answer to that. We also want to have an order of magnitude of the total cost and total size of an offshore grid. This will allow to scale the result of other technical work packages of the promotion project and also to illustrate some specific technical, legal and regulatory barriers. Also, having somehow a time deployment of the topology would allow to identify when we need to take specific action, and that can be used as input to the deployment plan. So what are the possible future scenarios? So we know the future is uncertain. We know also that the technology for meshed HVDC offshore grid is not yet fully mature. So what we try to do is we try to explore a set of scenarios to try to cover a range of realistic future. We mainly consider two dimensions. The first dimension is what we call the concept. In those four concepts, we have different ways to develop an offshore grid. In the first one, the BAU, we have only point-to-point connection to offshore wind farm and point-to-point connection for interconnector. In the national distributed concept, we have connection between offshore wind farm to have multi-terminal DC grid or meshed DC grid. In the European distributed concept, we have a slight difference compared to the national distributed concept. This difference is that offshore wind farm of one country can be directly connected to another country. The final concept is somehow a bit different, is that we allow the construction of artificial islands in order to connect wind to the artificial island and then evacuate that energy to shore. The second dimension that we consider is the level of offshore wind penetration. And this leads to three scenarios that range from 100 gigawatt by 2050 to 205 gigawatt in the high level scenario. Considering all those multiple scenarios is somehow a way to reduce the uncertainties. We have to note that indeed it's a combinatorial problem, so every time we try to include an additional parameter, we multiply the number of scenarios. Here we have 12 scenarios coming from 3 wind scenarios and the 4 concepts. And for all of them, we will try to develop topologies from 2020 up to 2050. To develop the topologies, we decided to follow a 3-step optimization process. Ideally, this should be a single step, a single optimization problem, but due to the high numerical complexity and the fact that we have somehow a greenfield transmission planning problem, we had to decouple this in 3 successive steps. The first step was to develop the wind scenario and to select what were the best sites for offshore winds. Then, once this step is done, we try to optimize the topologies for evacuation of wind to shore. And in the last step, we do a techno-economic analysis to optimize the interconnection capacities between countries. For our optimization problem, indeed we had to take a few assumptions. I would say those are simplifying assumptions in the sense that we don't cover all the potential range of possible parameters. So I will go through some of those simplifying assumptions, but I put all of them here so people are allowed to read those offline and don't have to go to the deliverable. So the main difference between each concept is that we don't have the same candidate lines for the transmission expansion problem. We have some constraint on onshore hosting capacity for each onshore station. We optimize the network by step of 5 years up to 2050. We assume a single voltage level is used in the North Sea, which leads to 4 possible cable rating. And we assume another voltage level for the Channel and the Irish Sea. Here we assume all HVDC configurations are bipole with metallic return, meaning that there's no extra cost somehow to connect multi-terminal to each other, which could happen if you have a different HVDC configuration. We size the offshore grid to evacuate the full offshore wind capacity, and we allow curtailment in N-1. We also have a full selective protection strategy. In the step for optimization of the interconnector, we use the TYNDP scenario as basis, and we use the DTU wind atlas for the wind profile. There, we selected the candidate expansion line manually with a cost that comes from a dedicated data collection report, which is internal to the promotion project. So what does our assumption mean in terms of planning criteria of the offshore grid? It means that in terms of normal operating condition, we don't want to have any overload of any lines to be able to evacuate the full wind installed wind capacities. In post-contingencies, we would like that the stability of the DC grid has to be maintained, but also of the onshore AC grid, and we don't allow any load shedding. In short, it means that the DC grid is designed to limit the permanent loss of power in feed into a specific synchronous area below the currently used reference incident for FCR sizing. Okay, let's go to some examples. So here we have the development of topologies for the high wind scenario by 2030. So you can see on the top left the BAU concept, which means that we have only point-to-point connection. Those dots are offshore wind farm limited to 2 gigawatts, which is for the moment the maximum platform size for bipole 525 kV. We also have the blue dots that are onshore sites, and as I said, the hosting capacity is limited to 4 gigawatts. The cable ratings range from 1 to 2 gigawatts, but here the color indicates in which year they are built. It's not linked to the rating. So we can see in the BAU that indeed we have many point-to-point connections. For the national and European scenario, we have way more candidate lines and the numerical complexity is much higher. That's why we had some clustering of sites. But we can already see by 2030 that we have some multi-terminal that appears for both the national and the European scenario. For the hub concept, we have those 6 artificial islands that are built at a predefined location, so it's not part of the optimization problem. And we try to locate somehow those artificial islands where we had a lot of offshore wind farm. By 2040, we can see the evolution of the grid. So in BAU, we have indeed way more point-to-point connection. We have also those bigger lines which represent optimization or increase cross-border capacities from the market simulation. We can see in the national and European scenario that the optimizer decide to invest not only from onshore point-to-point interconnector, but also in interconnector via the offshore grid. And this is clear in the national scenario where we have a potential backbone connecting offshore wind farm close to each other for cross-border purposes. And this is the case at many locations. So you have in the Dogger Band that connect many countries, but also between Germany and Denmark, and between Netherlands, Belgium, and UK. As I said, this means increasing the cross-border interconnection capacity for as a result of the techno-economic analysis. This is the case also for the European scenario. In the European scenario, we can see also that some offshore wind farms are directly connected to another country. And we have also increase of the cross-border capacity. For the hub scenario, we don't have exactly the same configuration, but we can also see that we have connection between islands that will increase the cross-border interconnection capacities between countries. By 2050, we can see that the offshore grid increase both in size and interconnectivity. The size of the grid can clearly be seen in the BEU case, where we have many point-to-point links close to each other. In the national concept, we see that now you have a link going to Norway, meaning that most of the North Sea countries are now connected via the offshore grid. This is somehow also the case in the European scenario, where we have the same observation. In the artificial island concept, the hub concept, as I said before, we don't have the same path for interconnecting countries, but we can see that many offshore islands are connected to each other, meaning that we have also the same benefit by having increased cross-border capacities. Are these topologies the expected result? If I take the example of the national concept and high wind scenario, and if I compare that with the video that is on the promotion website, we can see that we have some small differences. For example, the level of meshing or the location of the wind. So we tried somehow to have more realistic location of wind, and we have slightly less meshing, but we will explain why. However, we can see that the HVDC offshore grid connects all North Sea countries, and that's really key in this development of offshore grid. Okay, so what could change our result? We show in this figure, we try to use a single indicator to do a sensitivity on some parameter. This indicator is the total cable length for the offshore grid. You see in the dotted line the reference case, where in that case the European concept performed the best, followed by the national, hub, and then BEU. So what if we use lower platform rating? What if we have only 1 gigawatt platform instead of 2 gigawatt platform? In that case, the BEU concept is the most affected, and you almost need twice the total cable length than with bigger platform. The more coordinated approach are less affected, because even if you need more platform of smaller size, then you can somehow interconnect those platforms to reduce the required cable length. The second sensitivity perform is what if we have bigger cables, or what if, for environmental reason, you must have cables in the same bundle. In that case, that case benefits the most for the national and European concept, because then it's even more beneficial to have multi-terminal connection. The third sensitivity performed was on coordinated onshore and offshore grid planning. In that case, we assume that the onshore hosting capacity constraint could be somehow alleviated. And all concepts benefit from that assumption of a coordinated onshore and offshore grid planning, meaning that if you remove this onshore hosting capacity constraint, you can reduce the total cable length of the offshore grid. But indeed, this will have impact on the onshore grid that have to be taken into account. Finally, we had small sensitivity, but mainly on the centralized hub concept, and we try to allow, if I remember well, large scale storage of 6 to 8 gigawatt on each island. And in that case, you can significantly reduce the number of cables that is needed. What's very important is that in all cases, the sensitivity results are in favor of a coordinated approach. In all cases, you have more benefit for the national, European, or potentially hub approach, and this must be favorized compared to the BAU. So now, what messages can we bring to the deployment plan? If we have an indicative timing, if we can try to have an indicative timing of the development of an offshore grid, we can see that first we will have a phase where the radial design is optimized. Let's say up to 2030. Then we will have the apparition of multi-terminal HVDC grid. And those multi-terminal will grow and be expanded and interconnected to each other. That will allow for a significant cost reduction via coordination and multi-terminal DC grid. In a final stage, we will have potential formation of a grid backbone and coexistence of several offshore DC grid. At that moment only, we believe that it might be beneficial to create a single meshed offshore grid, but that will indeed depend on the economic viability of a single offshore grid. So what are our main messages? The first one is that the use of the offshore grid for both wind evacuation and interconnector is an important driver. So what we need to do is we need to be prepared, because this will happen, let's say around 2030, 2035 if we are pessimistic. We believe it will happen at some already known areas such as the German Bight, IJmuiden or the Dogger Bank. And we need to be sure that the national financial, regulatory and market framework are in place at that time. We also need a high level of coordination in grid planning, both on the maritime spatial planning, but also on a strong cooperation between national TSOs. Another important aspect is how do we facilitate the growth of a multi-terminal DC grid to accommodate more wind and more interconnection paths. There, indeed, coordination and cooperation in grid planning is essential. We believe that we need to have a coordinated maritime spatial planning, and this especially in areas where the cross-border distance between wind farms could be short. And that would facilitate the creation of a backbone in the North Sea. From the technological point of view, interoperability and the maturity of the technological option are key enablers for growing these multi-terminal grids. So what are the next steps? What is the way forward? The main message here is that increased coordination and cooperation is key. We will show two aspects where it is important. The first one is that the planning of an offshore HVDC grid is challenging. We tried to do the exercise and we identified that there were many uncertainties and parameters to consider. The numerical complexity of the problem is very high. And this, even if in our analysis, we didn't consider the onshore grid planning. So we believe it's important to adapt grid planning guidelines and potentially the tools for a coordinated onshore and offshore grid planning. Second important aspect is that the planning of an offshore HVDC grid requires a high level of coordination and cooperation between member states. So in our exercise here, we try to do an optimization process and we had to split this optimization into 3 successive steps. This might be suboptimal. And for example, in our wind scenario, we assume national targets, which led to the selection of the best national site. If we want to optimize the wind location at the European level, then maybe we need to optimize, we will maybe select other sites. And that's very important because if you select the best European site, it will benefit, for example, the European concept which needs high level of coordination. So we believe coordinated maritime spatial planning, considering grid planning constraints, will facilitate the development of an offshore HVDC grid. So many thanks for your attention. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact me by email. Thanks again.